This program outlines maintenance procedures for the ARO 2-inch nonmetallic diaphragm pump, model number PD20P-X. When repairing an ARO 2-inch nonmetallic diaphragm pump, always use genuine ARO service kits. To repair the air section of the pump, use kit number 637369. To repair the fluid section of the pump, use kit number 637373-X. Tools needed to repair this pump include a 10 mm wrench and socket, a 15 mm wrench and socket, 17 mm wrench and socket, a 50 mm or 2-inch socket, a 13/16 inch wrench, a large crescent wrench, a torque wrench measuring foot-pounds, a torque wrench measuring inch-pounds, an O-ring pick. Use of an impact wrench can ease the tear-down procedures. Prior to repairing the pump, make sure it has been flushed. Review the material safety data sheet for the fluid in the pump to determine what safety equipment or apparel may be needed when repairing the unit. Using the 17 mm socket, remove the 8 screws and washers that hold the top outlet manifold in place. Lift the manifold and remove the seats, O-rings, and ball checks. This step can be difficult depending on whether fluid has been allowed to dry within the pump. If material has been allowed to dry within the pump, never pry on the internal diameter to remove a seat. The lip on the bottom of the seat may allow you to pull a stuck seat assembly from the outlet manifold. Rotate the pump so the lower manifold can be reached. Use the 17 mm socket to remove the lower inlet manifold. Pull the seats, O-rings, and ball checks from the fluid cap. Again, if material has been allowed to dry within the pump, this step could be difficult. If necessary, you can use the lip on the bottom of the seat to pull a stuck seat assembly from the fluid cap. Use the 17 mm socket and a 15 mm wrench to remove the screws, washers, and nuts that hold the fluid caps to the air caps. Set the fluid cap aside. Inspect the fluid cap for wear or damage. Place the center body assembly in a vise. Then use the 50 mm socket or a large crescent wrench to loosen the diaphragm screws. Pull the diaphragm assemblies away from the air cap. One of the diaphragms will have the connecting rod attached. Place the diaphragm assembly with the connecting rod in the vise. Use the 13/16 inch wrench on the wrench flats of the rod to help loosen the diaphragm screw. Then remove the diaphragm and the diaphragm washers. Models with Teflon diaphragms will also have green backup diaphragms. Use a 10 mm socket to remove the 8 screws and washers that hold the major valve block and the adapter plate to the center body. Set aside the valve block assembly. Separate the adapter plate from the valve block. Use the pick to remove the O-rings and track gaskets from both the adapter plate and the valve block. Now remove the ceramic valve insert and the ceramic plate from the valve block. Also remove the O-ring from the base of the valve block. Place the valve block on the workbench. Use the 10mm wrench or socket to remove the nuts from the screws that run through the block. With the nuts removed, the screws and end plates can be pulled from the valve block. Now remove the end cap from the bottom of the valve block. Use the pick to remove the O-ring from the end cap. Remove the spool from the valve block. If the spool does not fall free, hold the valve block upright and gently tap it on the workbench to dislodge the spool. Now remove both U-cups from the spool. Now remove the O-ring, both track gaskets, and the two quick dump checks from the center body. Lay the pump center body flat on the workbench. Use the 15mm socket to loosen the 6 screws that hold the pump together. Remove the 6 screws. Discard the old crush gaskets from the screws. Use the pick to remove the unthreaded tri-plates. Then remove the track gaskets. Now lift the air cap from the pump center body. Remove the track gasket and O-rings from the center body. These components may adhere to the air cap. Set the center body aside. Remove the remaining O-rings and track gasket. Remove the connecting rod bushing. Now pull the U-cups from each of the air caps. Remove the threaded tri-plates and track gaskets from the second air cap. Pull the actuator pins and the sleeves from the center body. If the pump has been run with dirty air, this could be a difficult procedure. Remove the actuator pins and the O-rings from each of the sleeves. Now remove the large diameter O-rings from each side of the center body. Use a socket to push the pilot piston and the piston sleeve assembly from the center body. Remove the pilot piston from the pilot sleeve. Now remove the O-ring from the outer diameter of the pilot sleeve. Remove the remaining O-ring from the center body. This completes disassembly of the pump. Clean all components prior to reassembly. Use ARO service kits when rebuilding the pump. Apply Lubriplate FML2 grease to all O-rings and U-cups prior to reassembly. A packet of Lubriplate FML2 grease comes in each service kit. Install a new O-ring into the center body. Then install a new lubricated O-ring onto the outer diameter of the piston sleeve. Carefully insert the sleeve into the center body. Be careful not to cut any of the O-rings during this step. Lubricate the sleeve and the new pilot piston. Then insert the piston into the sleeve. Lubricate a new O-ring and insert it into the recess of the sleeve. Now insert the actuator pin through the sleeve, making sure the O-ring remains in place. Install a new lubricated O-ring into the center body. Then carefully insert each sleeve. Place new lubricated U-cups on the major spool valve. Make sure the lips on the U-cups face each other. Lubricate the internal bore of the valve block. Insert the spool, large end first. Be careful not to damage the U-cups on the spool. Place a lubricated O-ring on the end cap. Lubricate the internal and external diameters of the end cap and then insert it into the valve block. Make sure it is seated properly. Hold the valve block upright and place an end plate on top of it. Insert each of the 4 screws that run through the block. Slide the second end plate over the screws and tighten the 4 nuts with a 10mm wrench or socket. Torque each nut to 35 to 40 inch-pounds, or 4 to 4.5 Newton-meters. Lubricate the ceramic valve insert and install it into the valve block. Make sure the concave of the insert faces out. The radius of the concave should be parallel to the spool. Now lubricate and install the ceramic valve plates over the insert. Make sure the plate lies flat. The polished side should face the insert. The dimpled side should face out. Put new O-rings and track gaskets on both the adapter plate and the valve block. Place the adapter onto the valve block, making sure the two are properly aligned. Place the center body flat on the workbench. Install a new lubricated O-ring, the quick dump checks, and track gaskets onto the center body. Secure the valve block and adapter plate to the center body. Use the 8 screws, washers, and a 10mm socket or wrench. Torque each screw to 35 to 40 inch-pounds, or 4 to 4.5 newton-meters. Install new, lubricated O-rings and track gaskets onto each side of the center body. Lubricant helps hold these components in place. Install new lubricated track gaskets into each air cap. Lubricant helps hold the components in place. Place each air cap flat on the workbench. Install a new U-cup into each, making sure the lips face down. Then install the connecting rod bushing into one of the air caps. Place the center body assembly onto either air cap. Properly align the roll pins on the air cap as well as the actuator pin from the center body. Make sure all the O-rings and the track gasket remain in place during this step. Carefully place the second air cap onto the center body. Align the roll pins and the actuator pin. Install both unthreaded tri-plates into the air cap. Put new copper gaskets onto each of the 6 screws. Apply thread sealant to the threads, then run each screw through the center body to the other air cap. Carefully slide the center body to the edge of the workbench. Hold one of the threaded tri-plates in place and start each of the screws. Hold the second threaded tri-plate in position and start each of the 3 screws. Use the 15mm socket to secure each of the 6 screws. Torque the screws to 12 to 17 foot-pounds or 16 to 23 newton-meters. To build a diaphragm assembly, place a diaphragm on one of the diaphragm screws, followed by a backup washer. The smooth side of the washer should face the diaphragm. Repeat this step for the second diaphragm assembly. Pumps with Teflon diaphragms will have a green backup diaphragm. Secure the connecting rod to one of the diaphragm assemblies. Begin by applying Loctite 204 thread sealant to the threads on one end of the connecting rod. Lubricate the connecting rod. Insert the diaphragm connecting rod assembly into the center body. Be careful not to damage the U-cup. Apply a few drops of thread sealant to the other connecting rod threads. Then attach the remaining diaphragm assembly to the connecting rod. Using the torque wrench and a large crescent wrench, torque each diaphragm screw to 65 to 70 foot-pounds, or 88 to 95 newton-meters. If your pump has Teflon diaphragms, carefully align the bolt holes on the air cap. Secure the Teflon diaphragm to the air cap using a few fluid cap screws. This will prevent the diaphragm from spinning out of alignment when the diaphragm screw is being torqued. Align one of the fluid caps with the center body. Then use the screws, washers, nuts, the 17mm socket, and the 15mm wrench to attach the fluid cap to the center body. Follow the same procedure on the other side. Attach the second fluid cap to the pump center body. Torque each screw to 15 to 20 foot-pounds, or 20 to 27 newton-meters. Follow the star pattern outlined in the operator's manual when torquing these screws. Carefully insert new O-rings into the lower port of each fluid cap. Then install the ball checks and seats. Place the large O-rings onto the lower inlet manifold. Align the manifold with the fluid caps, then secure using the screws and a 17mm wrench or socket. Make sure the O-rings remain in place during this step. Torque each screw to 15 to 20 foot-pounds or 20 to 27 newton-meters. Stand the pump upright. Place an O-ring and seat on top of each fluid cap. Followed by a ball check and the second O-ring. Align the upper inlet manifold. Secure the manifold using the screws and a 17mm wrench or socket. Make sure the O-rings, ball checks, and seats remain in place during this step. Torque each screw to 15 to 20 foot-pounds or 20 to 27 newton-meters. This completes the disassembly and repair of the ARO 2-inch non-metallic diaphragm pump, model number PD20P-X.